I don't know about you, but with the present state of the world, all I've been able to think about in the last couple of months has been when do we hit the post apocalyptic phase of our existence and how do we survive it? Or do we just decide to burn it all to the ground in a world filled with injustice and self serving twats who live for oppressing others and forcing them to conform to their desires to create a world that serves their needs? Because I really do think we're close to that future with all the tomfoolery that is happening at the moment. And if that's the case, what book or books would give us a good idea of how society as we know it will evolve and change? Some might even say disintegrate because the stakes in a post-apocalyptic society are different as are the rules. These thoughts have been floating in my head for a while, clashing with remembered memories of how I felt when I read the Broken Heart Trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. It was my Patreon pick for the latter part of last year. So for 6 months, we read all 3 books following the story of Esun, Nasun, Alabaster, Shafa, and to some extent, Jija. Desperate to see how the world plays out, immersed in a world that broke us with its brutality and despondence, stripping us of our innocence with every turn of the page, and had us questioning, who is the villain? Who is the hero? Are those merely concepts that we cannot uphold when the world is ending and we are desperate to survive and spend the end of days in the arms of our family? From the introduction, I'm pretty sure you've already guessed it. I loved the Broken Earth Trilogy. I hold the memory of the books deep in my soul with the desire to read it for the first time all over again, cheering at the twists and turns I predicted, and simultaneously devastated and elated at the way it all ended. But before I go into my review and why I think the Broken Earth Trilogy is one of the best post-apocalyptic series ever written, and why you should go read it right now if you haven't, or reread it if you have, let's do a quick synopsis of what the story is about. And don't worry, I will try my best to ensure that this video is spoiler-free so you can enjoy the books the way they were meant to. Because I do believe that spoilers take a lot away from this series. Anyway, back to what these books are about. The trilogy kicks off with the first book in the series, the 5th season, which opens on a continent known as the Stillness. A very ironic name when you consider that moments after we start the book, an unknown character decides that that is the day the world would end and breaks it. This act would prove cataclysmic to a world that was unprepared for it, and that is the world we're dropped into. A world that sees a father kill his 3-year-old son because of a deep-seated fear of powers his son couldn't control, and kidnap his 8-year-old daughter with the hope that she doesn't have said powers. A world that sees a mother go on the hunt in search of her murdering husband and kidnapped daughter as the world as she knows and sometimes hates comes to an end. But even as we follow Esun's story in the 5th season, hers isn't the only journey that N.K. Jemisin takes us on, as we also follow Damaya, a young girl who discovers that not all families can and are willing to protect you, and everything can change the minute people who you've spent all your life with discover just how different you are. A moment that then brings a man that some would call a monster, others a savior, but to Damaya is a guardian, here to whisk her away to a place where she would seemingly find others of her kind and won't be as reviled for it. And then there's Cyanite, the origin with burgeoning power who can mold the Earth's magnetic forces to her whims, even as the Earth hates others of her kind, who lives in a world where origins are feared for their powers even as they are abused for it, and who is sent on her first journey outside the fulcrum, the safe haven that was created for her kind, where they are protected from the Stills, who are people without origin powers, who will do them harm, just as the Stills are protected from their kind as well. She's sent on this journey with Alabaster, a man who is so powerful, the powers that be treat him as a rabid dog and a stallion to breed other powerful origins. In this case, Cyanite's journey is meant to fulfill 2 functions: save an island, conceive another origin with one of the most powerful origins in existence. These 3 journeys of a preteen child, a woman in her 20s, and a mother in her 40s follow parallel lines until they interconnect in quite the most intriguing and brilliant of ways, with each of these characters having their own full circle character development in the books, and a shocking revelation and twist at the end of the 5th season that kicks off the rest of the books in the series. Now, as someone who loves books that focus on journeys and the symbolism of the characters reaching discoveries about themselves, who they are, and what they stand for, just as they reach their destination, following these characters who are participating in a great emigration brought on by the end of the world was utterly fulfilling for me. I loved every moment of it, which means it's the perfect time to speak on the themes of the series. I will focus on the big three, starting with the breaking of the stillness, which I interpret in three very distinct and yet interconnected ways. The first way to interpret the breaking of the stillness is the actual physical breaking of the continent that we see at the start of the series, and how it kicks off the 5th season, one that brings a radical change to the geography of the continent, as the seasons are wont to do, and the decimation of the population who are caught unawares. This can be drawn in parallel to the theme of climate change and exactly the type of future we are creating for ourselves by not taking the warning seriously and trying to mitigate the damage we are doing to Earth. The second way to interpret the breaking of the stillness is the disruption of the status quo that had grown still in the millennia between seasons, which is connected to the belief that history is cyclical and humanity is doomed to repeat its mistake even as the world continues to turn in the direction it's always done. The only way to bring about a change is to shock people out of the state of ennui that are settled in and break the stillness, if you will, of that autopilot existence, one that the people of the stillness had settled in the millennia between the last season and the present one. The status quo cannot be allowed to be the status quo, and we see this in the series as the world that we leave behind at the end of the stone sky isn't the one we met in the 5th season. It's a vastly different world. The third way to interpret the breaking of the stillness can be seen in the unsettling of various characters' lives. Characters who up until that moment had settled in the quiet stillness of domestic life, of existing, and in the breaking of the stillness, they are pushed out of this way of existence into more. We see this especially with Esun, who through the jolt she experiences from the breaking of the stillness, which I'm of course referring to both the breaking of the world and the breaking of her world as she knows it, after she walks in on the corpse of her 3-year-old son and her daughter missing with her murdering husband also gone. In that moment, the stillness broke for her, and it is that experience that drives her and drives a lot of the plot of the series alongside, as she sets off on her journey, meeting people along the way, even as she discovers the parts of herself she's kept buried and evolved as a character through the journey. There's also the theme of parental love and loss, and just how far a parent would go to be reunited with their child. In Esu's case, she braves the end of the world for the vengeance of her son and to save her daughter. And as the story unfolds, we see even more of the sacrifice she's made as a parent and how much she's lost as well. And this also applies to the evil Earth, who we find out becomes the way it does because of parental love and loss, and how what both Esun and the Earth want is to be reunited with their children. This as well is a crucial thing that drives the story and propels it forward in a way that keeps upping the stakes, because what happens when your child grows so far out of reach? How does that change you as a parent? How does that change how you interact with a world that you blame for that loss? What happens when you are reunited with that child? Does that settle everything? Not really, but it creates an avenue for healings to start, for a broken world to start to mend. Parents are not guardians of good. Sometimes they make selfish decisions. It's their myopic way of keeping us safe. But when you realize that a lot of the decisions they take, some that can be quite horrible when you really consider it, is done because of a love and a fear of loss, then it has you questioning just what pedestal our parents deserve to be put on. And the last theme I will touch on is the theme of rebirth. Because as much as the Broken Earth trilogy can be quite devastating and depressing and just leaves you feeling hopeless, the theme of rebirth is pretty strong within the story. Characters shed parts of themselves and are reborn into newer, wiser, and stronger versions of who they can be, but not without acknowledging who they were. This is something that practically every character in the series experiences, from Esun to Cyanide to Damaya to Nasun to Shafa to Alabasta to Tonki to Hoa to Antimony to Lerna. These characters evolve and change and are reborn, and the same can be said for the Earth itself, that after a cataclysmic event that changes you occurs, it is only expected that the you that emerges from such an event is a reborn you, a better and stronger and wiser and a more aware version of you. But it's not only the things that had me in a chokehold, it's the characters and how fleshed out they are. They feel like actual people with all the messiness that brings. It's the world building and how well written the series is. I feel like I'm actually there. I'm living in the stillness, on the run with Esun, clutching my broken hand as I felt Damaya's pain, feeling that itch as I wanted to rage with Cyanite's anger, cackling alongside Alabaster even as I saw the world through his eyes. The series had me inhabiting the skin of the characters themselves, and for those months I spent reading the 3 books, I was not myself. The world as it exists right now didn't exist that way for me. This is honestly why I believe that the Broken Earth Trilogy is one of the best post-apocalyptic series out there, because it gives us the despondence of everything being destroyed because of humanity's own actions. It shows us a world where the oppression of a group of people would eventually lead to anger and hatred and a desire to bring the whole world crumbling down. It shows us just how desperate people can get to save those they love, and how that same love can be warped and twisted and make others kill those they love. It shows us that people are not all heroes and not all villains, that even an omnipresent entity can feel the loss of a child. It shows us that community is how we survive even when the world is coming to an end, but that also community is premised on people being useful to said community, and those that fail in doing so will be left out in the wild to die, which is horrible. And finally, it helps us see that a broken world can eventually be fixed, that hope is not utterly gone, and that there exists within each of us the seeds for rebirth, even in the earth itself. So yeah, I love the Broken Earth Trilogy. Do you feel the same? Do you hate it? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it, comment, share it, subscribe, and I'll see you next Wednesday at 4 p.m. EST. Bye.